Hello, everyone, and welcome to Activity M13, the Digital Instructional Design, Discovery Design versus Addies, EduJedi Leadership Society moment here. This activity is really going to focus in on a discussion around what's going on with design now that everything changed during the pandemic. And we're all trying to make sure that schools and districts remain as relevant as possible. So we're going to talk about that today. I want to introduce you to who's with us. My name, of course, is LeiLani Cauthen. I'm the CEO of the Learning Counsel and a proud EduJedi Grand Master. As a publishing and news organization, we've been sort of tracking what the EduJedi have contributed to for years. Since the first dictionary came out, we've held quite a few activities since then to edit the dictionary. Now we're getting into the models that the EduJedi came up with. So we're going to have with us today, hopefully he will join here in a moment, Jesse Ireland, who's from Columbus City Schools. He's the K-12 Teaching and Learning Coordinator. Dr. PJ Caposey. Did I say your last name right, PJ?
Nailed it.
Nailed it? Woo! Okay, Superintendent of Meridian CUSD in Illinois. And then also Dr. Lee Buddy, who's the principal from Wade Park School, Cleveland Public Schools. He's an EduJedi Award winner too. So awesome to have you, Dr. Buddy. And then we also have with us Dr. Wendy Oliver, who's the Chief Learning Officer from EdisonLearning, and Zach Simmen, who's the Assistant Director of Instruction and Advisement from Edison. What I want to do here first is have them give us a little bit of intro from that commercial side, the professional grade side, because it will help frame the whole conversation. So Wendy, over to you.
LeiLani, thanks so much for having us and allowing us to join in this conversation. I'm really excited about today's discussion. I'm especially excited because it is about instructional design, and that is what we do every day at EdisonLearning as we develop content for students and teachers. EdisonLearning has been around for approximately 3 decades, and we design digital content, and we work with districts to either have their teachers teach it, or we also have an instructional team that operates in multiple states with multiple state certifications to teach students. We also have a direct-to-consumer where we work with a lot of homeschool families. So we really can speak to today and hopefully show some examples that I think will help clarify with this design model that we're going to talk about in comparison with Addies. Hopefully we can show some examples that will help clarify the difference in digital instructional design. So I'm really looking forward to it. And again, thank you for having us here. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to show some examples of our content as we go through the discussion today.
Good. I know Zach will be able to do that. There was some screenshots in my slide deck about, sort of shows some of the differences here in terms of the linearity of the model. But I want to get right into this. So let's do this first. Let's have PJ give a little intro to what he sees happening, what's been going on for him in his district, and then I'll go to Dr. Buddy, and then if Jesse joins, we'll have Jesse do the same thing. Is that okay, PJ? Go.
Absolutely. So my name is PJ Caposey. I'm Superintendent of Schools of Meridian 223. It's a small town district in Northwest Illinois, about 2,000 students in 4 buildings. So what has happened for us in year 2 of the pandemic is that as we thought we would evolve and this would help us push forward in terms of instructional design and what we're doing, is what we have found is that particularly administratively, the chaos and the conversation around all things pandemic kind of have in many ways pushed us further and further away from the instructional conversation. So as we thought we would emerge stronger from this in year 2 and start thinking about what went well in terms of virtual and digital instruction and hybrid instruction, as we had kind of explored every single possible model last year, we thought we'd be getting into the depths of those conversations and stealing the strengths of all of them in order to improve the instructional model, whereas we have just been bombarded with community pressure regarding masking and quarantining and testing and all of those things that have become kind of crisis level administrivia, as opposed to having deep conversations about how we can better serve students and perhaps change the educational model as we know it. So it's been, year 2 has been harder for me to navigate and to implement meaningful, significant change than occurred in year 1, which is certainly not what I would have predicted 4 months ago.
Wow, that's interesting. So you're still treading water. I don't think you're alone. Just don't feel alone.
Oh,
I
I
think
know
this
I'm
is
not
true
alone.
everywhere.
It's
Yeah.
it's being a superintendent right now, particularly in Illinois and even throughout the country. I would say that this has been by far the hardest 2 months of the hardest 2 years of my career, in terms of trying to handle the political and outside pressures of opening and keeping open a school, and doing none of the things that fill my cup, which is talking about teaching and learning and trying to push the envelope in terms of how we best serve kids.
Well, cool. Then you're gonna have an hour of like relief, just being able to
Amen.
be here too. Okay, good. All right. So Dr. Lee Buddy, so good to have you and see you again. Tell me what's been happening for you.
So thank you so much once again for the invitation. So here in Cleveland, definitely last year, as we've spoken about, I mean, Cleveland leads the nation just with the number of kids in poverty. When everything hit and we had to shut down schools last March, we had over 85% of our families throughout the city that had no internet at their house. Out of our 40,000 students that we serve here in Cleveland, we probably had only about 8,000 devices. So it was really a quick switch with, trying to get Chromebooks and iPads and laptops brought in while working with partners to provide, high-speed internet. So definitely, year and a half or so later, we do have, I would dare say about 60 to 70,000 devices in the district now. Any family that needs internet, we have hotspot devices for them. And we've worked with several partners in the area where they are installing high-speed internet in any household in the district. And as long as the student stays in Cleveland Metropolitan School District, the district will pay for their internet. So we've definitely done a huge shift. Definitely now we're moving into really the support piece and making sure that families understand how to use those devices. When a student breaks the device, what's the process to get it, fixed and replaced. So, Cleveland, is now a one-to-one district, but, with that comes a whole lot of other set of challenges. So that's kind of the space we're in now, and really just providing the devices, providing the support for the devices. All the kids are back in school, so then making sure the kids are staying safe, protected, while providing those supports has been our biggest challenge right now.
Your early stage is just getting equity done, and making sure there's access and parents who don't even know how to turn something on and
Correct.
all that. But at least you're getting out there, right? Like if you're forced back into full quarantines and stuff like that, people can still Zoom or,
Correct. Yeah,
say
has
something,
devices,
right? Yeah.
which last year we just did not have. So we had a lot of kids, borrowing cell phones to try to log on Zoom, with mom or dad or grandma's cell phone. And then the data or so running out, and then I can't log into class because my mom's out of data for the month. So a lot of those challenges that we had last year, we would not have now, which is great.
Wow. Okay, good. Hopefully you're using some of the big funds flowing in to help fill some of those gaps.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, good for you. Okay, well, it looks like Jesse joined us. Hi, Jesse. Good to have you.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, what we're having the educator side do right now is give a little color behind what's happening for you in your schools. We're going to get into instructional design and what's going on with all the professional grade stuff and the big, transition to leaning harder on technology for distribution of knowledge and things with teachers. But what's happening for you out there in Columbus City?
And so this year we have a new department, the Department of Learning Technology, that we actually got is in response to what happened this past year. Like we didn't have a formalized department that kind of focused on the instructional design aspects of technology and how to make it work with pedagogy in the classroom. And so now we have a department that's focused on that. So we officially came together in June. And so we've been rapidly getting ourselves up to speed. But our district right now, our learning management system is Canvas. and we have also Mastery Connects as our assessment management system. And the nice things about those two platforms, they integrate with each other. So ideally, going to next year, right now we're doing a gradual release model in terms of how to roll it out. So this year, teachers or students inside campus themselves taking professional development courses, so they get a student perspective of what it looks like to be a student in our LMS. And then moving into next year, our teachers and students are going to be more fully inside Canvas, along with Mastery Connects. And so our long-term vision is to have Canvas be our one-stop shop where this is your learning content, but you also have access to your assessments as well. Because with Mastery Connects, we can tie in the assessments into Canvas, and it feeds into our Infinite Canvas, which is where our gradebook is. And so it's kind of like a cycle where you can do your assessments, your curriculum in one place. And the reason being is that we recently did a couple years ago an audit, a curriculum audit in our districts. And what we found that there wasn't, we have a large district, almost 50,000 students in 119 schools. And so like we have a vast array of equity in different phases of that. Like some students might have access, some might not. Some teachers are maybe doing certain things, some aren't. So there was no way to kind of systematize what was happening throughout the districts. And so we're using Canvas and Mastery Connect to provide, okay, this is the foundational bit of knowledge that everyone is going to have access to. And now teachers still have the ability to customize the courses, customize the content per student, but this way we can have a sound foundational bit across the districts to provide more equitable access in the curriculum and content. So that's kind of what we're working on right now as a department, is kind of working on the PD for that, what that looks like, and getting those two platforms kind of up to speed.
So looking at your operational continuity and also your full curriculum roadmap.
Right.
Digital, yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to make, and we're right now in the process of designing a course review process. So like we want to have a course design rubric that, hey, everybody has this kind of what are the must-haves, or in terms of what we're trying to look for with a Canvas course or any LMS course, for example. But what we found right now, we use Google Classroom. A lot of teachers currently use Google Classroom, but it's really up to the teacher to make that what it is. Like it's all individualized. Whereas something like Canvas, if you have a system-wide system, you can provide some type of, okay, everybody has some baseline foundational bit. Whereas Google Classroom, there's no way you can do that. It's totally up to the teacher to make it work or not make it work, depending on your skill level with technology and so forth.
Yeah, and then the scraping of data back out of that to feed your LMS and look at every 6th grade math class. Hard, very hard.
Yes, right, exactly. Because we have benchmarks for our district that we're using this year for Mastery Connect, so we can look at the benchmark data, and based on where we see some struggles, now we can push out a curriculum in Canvas. And so it's all kind of tied together. It's a way to kind of have a feedback loop kind of built inherently into the system.
Yeah, smart. Yeah, so you're in the same place, I would say, probably 50% of the larger districts are. They're all trying to increase that whole sophistication. So let's get into this conversation now. So we're going to be talking about the basics of digital instructional design that acknowledge the facts of digital distribution, digital creation, and how things flow around, and then the insertion of the human into that teaching student, right? So essentially, this was originally an EduJedi draft model. We're going to look at the discovery design more, but I think it's important that I switch screens here, show you a larger version of it. In the last event, we talked about workflow logistics design, which is a little bit about what Jesse was just talking about. PJ is trying to get to, and Dr. Buddy, I think you're probably knee deep in this already yourself, but workflow design is a little bit like what an LMS does, but a lot what professional grade digital full courseware does. Okay, so it's running your navigation with predetermined teacher intersection rather than the reverse, which is what Google Classroom and LMSs do, which is Addies design. Teacher does all the leadership, every little button push, every little time somebody needs an email or somebody needs another thing in the system, it's all done that way. So workflow logistics design, essentially, if you notice number 5 on this, You're determining when your live intersection is as a teacher. And then the last thing is these are new terms for instructional design, termination or continuance. Like in software, do I let the student be gated to the next level, like in a game, or do I keep them at this level with the rest of the class? Do I terminate this particular lesson and push a new one? Those are the questions that come in once you have used technology. So we're going to talk a little bit more about discovery design today. So discovery design, a lot of people have equated to project-based learning, but essentially, and this is for you, Jesse, once you have a full LMS and then you also tag in something like EdisonLearning courses, who's on the line today, or Safari Montage or somebody like that, that is a lot of stuff. You basically have a walled garden of stuff. And then instead of every little thing, lecture, teacher, moment, push this PDF, do this over here, you're just giving kids a Socratic question and saying, go figure it out. Here's your wall garden. Here's all your stuff for your lab or whatever. That's what the commercial side is doing a lot. It's allowing students to pose their own theses from some generalized question, map their own discovery, design their thesis, implement that through proof refinement back and forth with the teacher, and then do that live intersection as needed. Okay, so let's talk about this discovery design and what you kind of feel about it now that you have your tech hat on of all the things technology could be doing to enable that. PJ, I'm going to call on you first.
I think the flow and the model, I think, makes a ton of sense. I think it's also super intuitive when you consider taking it out of the tech world, right? Like, so that's the way that I would start these conversations with my teaching staff, is because anytime you mention technology, sometimes there's a percentage of staff that bristle. And so when you break this down, this is just simply good instruction. This is good instruction that's somewhat codified and modeled and put into a workflow system that makes sense when you put the tech hat on. But from a consumer perspective or a facilitator perspective, I think it also just makes really good sense when you look at it from just a good old-fashioned pedagogical approach in terms of how we're going to influence teaching and learning, both at the teacher and the student level.
Okay, good comment. All right, Dr. Buddy, what are your thoughts on this?
I second that. Definitely, when you bring anything new to teachers, on top of everything else they're juggling right now, there's sometimes a hesitation to even embrace the tool or software, or even a model that you're trying to bring to them. Just like I said, because it's just so much they're juggling. But definitely, I think just the way it's laid out, and how it would help them drive instruction. I think once, depending on how you introduce it to a staff potentially, I think they would embrace it and definitely see the benefits of it.
Okay, thank you. Jesse, I don't know how much you get into this level of stuff, like how things flow, but it seems to me like implementing all these major systems you've been thinking about this a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so before we even, like for Canvas says that before we go into the platform, we want teachers to think about how you design a lesson, any lesson. Just how do you do instruction, right? How do you design a well implemented lesson? And so we've spent a lot of time what we call intentional planning. And so, like, okay, what does that mean when we talk about intentional planning? Well, you think about you designing your lesson with the user in mind. So a lot of design thinking, like you design with the user in mind, not what's easy or convenient for an adult to implement. So, which is easy to say but hard to do. And so, like, how do you have a solid knowledge from your student perspective? How do you design your content and your learning experiences with your students in mind? And what standards are you going to apply? How are you going to get students to that mastery of those standards? So all of this makes sense in this model in terms of just solid instruction, what you want to do for instruction. Forget about the technology bit for a minute. Map out your instruction on paper or in writing, and then how can you use something like Canvas or whatnot to make it more easier to use, make it more, to make it easier to more accessible and so forth. But first you have to have the instruction bit down first. You don't want to bring in technology right away. You want to bring in what's good instruction, what's it like, what are my goals? What standards am I going to hit? What assessments am I going to use? How do I know what mastery looks like? What feedback loop am I going to bring in? All those sorts of good instructional focused questions first before you even want to talk about what the technology can do.
Yeah, I totally agree with all of that. And I think one of the things that you said that I think is really important to pull out, and then I'm going to have Wendy maybe speak about this from the professional grade side, is that the difference really here between Addies and these other two lanes is notice that it's intentional about the student. It's not just Addies was top down always. But that what you just said, Jesse, about, you know, what the student is doing as you're thinking through your lesson, you're thinking about what they're doing. Well, when you're navigating digital systems, it's like they get lost down in the 67th subfolder, and navigation is like, you know, scary, and that's what goes on in some systems. So when you're thinking about the execution of your lesson in the digital sphere, you're also thinking about navigation. If they're 8-year-olds, how big are the buttons, you know, right? They got to be really fat for those little tiny 6-year-old fingers, you know. All those things come into play. So I'm glad you said that. Wendy, what are your thoughts?
I just want to say what they said. So, you know, LeiLani, what I love about this, and I would agree with Dr. Caposey, is it's good pedagogy, because you immediately hop into those levels of higher order thinking of Bloom's and of Webb's, right? Because you hop into learner discovery. So you're in those higher levels. And then to follow up with what Dr. Buddy said, teachers are afraid of change, and this is new because everybody knows Addie. However, teachers are afraid of technology as well. But when they realize that this model incorporates the teacher into it, as you said, right? And so when they see, I think, that this requires the teacher to intersect. Let me say that again since my phone went off. I think when they see that this requires the teacher to define where that intersection is, where is that live interaction, that's where I think teachers realize that facilitation is so incredibly important. And that's the beauty of this model. And I think this absolutely captures it. So I think it's great. I love it. And in the commercial side, when we're developing, you have to think of all those pivot points within the curriculum, because you're taking advantage of the technology. In a classroom where it's just the teacher and maybe they're using flat design, where they're using Google Classroom, for example, they don't necessarily have the AI within the curriculum to make those decisions. But when they have the systems like what we're talking about today, when they have Canvas or other LMS systems or curriculum, they definitely can use this model. And if they design right for the model, then it's certainly more effective for the children.
Exactly. And I think I want to pull out from you then one of the things that you mentioned here is that the biggest difference between the analog and the digital world here is that it allows you to think, and Jesse, you said it very well. I think you said that, you know, methodically, or another word there, of exactly what what the humans do. So where is the fine use of the human teacher? Like, what is the best thing teachers do? It's not filing things and figuring out which folder to put it in and all that other stuff. It's, or telling you all your login information. It's the teaching that is the critical moment. And this design is different. The EduJedi came up with a model difference, so different than Addies, in that Addies thinks as a teacher, you're always in front of the class, you're always in lecture mode or lead mode, right? Homework is when you do your reading at home or whatever. But that all shifted when things went digital. So that the biggest shift here is the refinement of what we think a teacher is. What is their best mode and their best quality, and how do we make technology do everything else so they can just do that? So I love that you said that. I love that you pulled it out. So let's go then into these next parts of this, where the model is actually talked about from what makes it different in terms of the EduJedi model, the discovery design, different than the Addies design. And I just want to kind of have us glance at this first one. detaching the assumption of place, time, that teacher centricity, like basically being in the classroom all day, every day, and prior structure. So I want to go around and just talk about that one first. We don't have to talk about all of them in this hour, but I think we should talk about that first, since we still sort of are in the pandemic here and there, going into quarantine, you know. PJ, why don't you go first?
So I think that the element of this is that the design, I think, is brilliant, and it makes sense, and it probably is, you know, decades overdue in terms of schools moving to this direction. I think the challenge currently is that leading change in the pandemic is really hard, right? Like, so just because the structure of having potentially multiple schools or districts on remote learning might be over at this point of the pandemic, the stress and the angst and the residue of the pandemic, I think, is looming large right now. So for me, I think anything that is talking about second order or adaptive change when it comes to humans right now is incredibly difficult. So the change process has to be nurtured, I think, almost more than in a time of homeostasis, which is kind of weird. I thought that we would be able to use the pandemic to leverage it and to move quicker because we would have seen successes. And what I'm finding in my work with humans, not only in my district, but in other districts I'm working with, humans right now are just clinging toward what they believe was normal and grasping it harder than they had in the past. So I think leading change right now, what I thought would have been a very fertile ground in terms of doing it, what I'm finding is that it's an emotional sticking point for many right now. So everything that's said there, I think, is absolutely dead on and overdue. I just think it's really hard to move humans productively with intellectual discourse that's rational and not emotional right now.
I totally agree. Everyone's stressed to the max. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. We want normal, but we want better normal, right? But I also think that a lot of times, and I'll just make this comment, leadership talking about technology as a way to offload workload, what technology should do for you so you're less stressed, isn't said enough. You know, it's sort of like you're going to use this system and blah, blah, and, you know, rather than this is going to make your life so much easier. I know it's a little bit of learning curve, but it's no big deal. You know, it's going to be awesome because then you can spend more time with the kids. It's going to be so great, right? I don't know that we say that enough. PJ, do you bring that up when you're talking to teachers, or as the
yes, but,
because I know they're already
but
stressed.
Every administrator that brings that up is still paying for the sins of their predecessors. So every time that someone has said we're going to do this and it's going to take something off your plate and it's going to make it easier for you, this is not a new line. This is a line they've heard before, and so that's cultural, right? Like so that like I think that is. We can give it lip service, but when there's a really healthy culture and a culture of change and progress and a culture that views progress as the destination that's more desirable than the status quo, then I think all of this is really easily accessible and to do. And like I think that's what we were working really hard toward in my district. And I think we were making rapid, massive change year over year over year. And I thought, if anything, the pandemic would serve to accelerate that because some of the equity issues that we heard discussed when we opened up, like, we were there already. Like, we had already taken those steps and we were going pretty hard. And now what I'm finding, instead of being an accelerant, the pandemic has actually served to kind of slow those processes down, which is just, again, something I would not have predicted 14 months ago. As soon as I got over the initial fear of the pandemic, I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be able to use this. So this is going to move us so fast. It's going to be this massive opportunity. And what I found, while that seems to make sense just in working with humans, it has not been the case in many places, including my own district.
It's almost like a grief period. We're all going through a grief period. Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of the New York superintendents. Okay, so Dr. Buddy, what are your comments on this? You know, we were talking a little bit about detaching the assumptions of place, time, teacher centricity, and then everything that PJ said also. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, really to piggyback on what PJ said, I think we had similar thoughts, and definitely started in last school year with all of my teachers, really teachers across our district, were teaching from home from August really up until middle of March. We had a lot more folks and definitely more of a learning space because they had no choice but to learn, how to use Zoom, how to learn a whole new learning management platform that many didn't even know what a learning management platform was prior to August. So it really forced them to be in the learner stance and, pick up tools and strategies of how to make things work. And definitely just comparing that to the space, a lot of them came back this school year where kids are in the classroom. Some of the questions that have come up, well, yeah, we know our kids are one-to-one, but, I'm not using that device. Well, you're not forcing you to use the device, but every kid in your room has a device now. So, how are we continue to use that learning management platform? How are we continue to use the tools that we've invested in over the last year and a half, and really just make sure we're not going back to, as our CEO continues to say, we're not going back to normal, but what's our new normal post-pandemic and what's our vision moving forward? So it's really been an ongoing conversation for us, and just really making sure, like I said, we're pushing our educators to use the tools and pushing them to ask questions, and definitely when supports are needed, make sure we have those supports readily available for them.
Okay, I'm making a note before I have Jesse talk. And Zach, I'm not ignoring you. I know you're going to screen share in a little bit. So we need to put a line into this, how this model is different than Addies, in that these are all, they're not acknowledging that there is a requirement to shift to an EduJedi type of instructional model, in that you have this human, the need for time, as well as a huge amount of PD. Okay, so Jesse, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, similar to what they were saying, so remote learning, you had to force the issue, right? So now we're back in face-to-face dominant way of instruction. Well, how are you using LMS or Google Classroom, whatever your platform is, remotely is going to be vastly different than how you use it face-to-face. So some of it's more that blended learning approach. How do I can tell people to go to the learning platform remotely because that's kind of what we have. But now I have more options or more things available in the face-to-face environment. Now it's not sticking everybody in a Chromebook. It's how do I actually use this in a blended learning environment face-to-face? And so we've had to help people not only talk about devices, but how do we actually use them in a pedagogically sound manner? So for example, we have this kind of in our minds a dual pathway, how to use the LMS, but also how to blend the learning. So you have to kind of do those simultaneously, because if not, if people can use the LMS, but they don't understand how to use it in a face-to-face environment, then it's not really impactful. So I think some people, for instance, in Google Classroom, they're used to using that in remotely, but then now how do I shift my practice to now that I have a different environment? Because remote learning is not going to be the same thing as face-to-face or blended learning. And so some of the teachers were used to that remote bit, but then all of a sudden now I'm face-to-face with students. Well, how do I incorporate Google Classroom or blended learning? How do I incorporate that now face-to-face? Because I'm not going to have some students online 100% of the time back when they're in the classroom. So how do I set up an environment that is going to work work for my students, but it's not just putting them in front of a computer all day long? Because I think the teachers, they don't have quite the skill set to now transition from fully remote to face-to-face, because they're not the same thing. And so I think that's just the PD, that there needs to be a vast amount of PD, and a big part of that PD is just a mindset shift of how do I incorporate technology in a meaningful way and not just put it out there for students.
Yeah, and then you even have places where it's like you're simultaneously teaching remote and live at the same time. It's going to be awesome. It gets really wild. I want to go to Wendy, and Wendy, we also should dovetail into maybe a screen show of this line. I think you guys have something to show on that, so go ahead and dovetail into that. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think is significantly different as a result of the pandemic, I know people are very hard to change, and we have all kinds of things happening in this country right now. But one thing that has been really evident, at least in our research and in even what we're seeing in people wanting to enroll in our direct to consumer, is that parents have realized that they have choices. And that's interesting to me, right? I think it's the first time, even from when I was in public education, that parents are realizing, hey, we have some choices we want to see and enroll in some different options. And that is also what I see when I look at the difference between Addie's model and the EduJedi model. Because if you look at the last step of Addie's model, it's evaluation. So you've got this very traditional model that stops at evaluation. Whereas in commercial grade products, you stop at either termination or continuance, which might be reteaching based on performance. And in a commercial grade product, that's done for you because it's based on how the student performs using artificial intelligence. Whereas when I was in the classroom, we won't talk about how long ago that was, I was making those myself by hand for my students. And of course, it was before I had children, and I had the time to do it, right? Or I chose to use my time that way. And so, but that's a significant difference in providing these tools to teachers that actually, are personalized and customized to student progress. And that's what the one thing that the technology can do for you. So I see that as a huge difference when you're designing with the technology. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that.
Yeah, and one of the things we should probably bring up is here in the EduJedi piece. I'm still screen sharing, yeah. There is a difference between how much time over here on the left you're going to spend doing instructional planning as a teacher if you're just doing it at the document, or PowerPoint has single loop animations where you can make a slide spin around and stuff. Those are low level skills in the digital world. Collections are like the LMS field, where it's a big repository, but it's empty until you fill it up. Versus all the way at the designer level mix of courseware, where the navigation and the reteaching and now you got to go see the teacher is a totally different thing, and it's more automated. So it's burden at the low end digital realm versus unburden at the high end, but a complete refinement of the teacher role and what they're doing. So I just want to point these things out to you, because this is what the model is really acknowledging. Both levels of the model is what is the workload you're shoving on digital now. So I just want to point that out. So I think one of the things we want to do next is just sort of get through some more discussion on the differences between the model and what it means as all of your schools, and PJ, I know you're still in the middle of everything right now, but as you get through that, where it's going. And Doug, if we can transfer screen share over to Zach, there was the issue with acknowledging student discovery autonomy, even entirely using the open internet, is a big deal now on the commercial side, and it's something that the design model is trying to acknowledge. And then when I come back to the educators on the line, maybe you can talk about whether or not you intentionally shut down YouTube, and other sites, because there's rules now in schools.
All right, hello everybody. I just want to say I have enjoyed this conversation. I respect everything that you all are going through out there. And so right now I'm sharing a screen of our course, but I do want to show the discovery based aspect of it. But just to kind of give you a little bit of a preface to it, you can see that students are going to work through a couple of these learning objects. This is kind of goes to speak to how technology can kind of control that pacing. To send students back to reteaching if they need it kind of automatically. It frees our teachers up to intersect at different points using data or using information that they receive from the system. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to this project to kind of show you some of the ways that we use that discovery. And this actually will show the linearity of our lessons too. So all of these lessons are completed by our content team, and they will follow that instructional design model that we have set. The teachers do not lesson plan, they do not create the lesson, but really they're working to intersect to support students to find gaps in the content where they can add color, to engage students. So it really frees our teachers up to be able to be a teacher. And so when we look at the project, and I absolutely adore this project, it's college ROI. So it's a return on investment of if you're going to go to college. It really allows the students to kind of really discover themselves through this this project. And I personally wish I would have gone through this myself when I was deciding where I was going to go to school, because I would have learned a ton. And I'm just going to show this page because it kind of breaks down all of the learning activities, all the different things that the student will build themselves throughout that project or throughout this time. And so students will get this planning guide, and they start off with an internal investigation. So they're going out to the internet, they're researching whether they want to go to a specific university, whether they want to go to a trade school. It's their choice, and they're going to go out and do that internal investigation, really build their foundational knowledge in economics. And then I love this part, they get to do an external investigation. So they're actually going outside, they're interviewing somebody, they're asking them what they, what made their choices. So we get students interviewing their moms and dads and having these amazing conversations that they may not have had they not had this opportunity. And so from there, they're building, and this is just one example. We have dozens of these projects where students are really, like LeiLani, like you said, creating their own thesis, having those intersection points, bouncing them off of teachers. Teachers are intersecting and providing feedback, providing guidance. Like I said, they're not lesson planning, they're not creating all this content, so they're able to create resources for students. Like for instance, this is something that teachers are sending to students to help them with their investigations. This is accessible no matter what time, no matter what day, no matter where students are at in their courses, packed full of resources for them and ways to help them.
Okay, so cool. Let's go back to the conversation about this difference between the guiding of attention now available commercial grade, and from Learning Council research, it's a threat horizon really for schools everywhere, and kind of where you're at right now. I mean, all three of you have talked about the struggles through that you're still in many instances, PD everywhere, devices getting out, getting through the grief moment. We're just talking now about sort of where it's all going. So what are your thoughts on sort of getting a mindset around where things sort of are inevitably sort of dovetailing into, and what that kind of means for you? Let's go in reverse order this time, just to be fun. Jesse, how about you first?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is helping teachers understand that I think a lot of them with technology feel as though they might get replaced altogether. And so I think having them help understand the valuable aspects of a teacher and what they're there for, right? So I think sometimes they think, oh, I gotta do everything, and that involves teaching and learning. I need to be control of everything and from A to Z, right? So what are those pieces that I can allow myself not to have so much control over? And then one of those pieces that I want to make sure that I have, direct input on, whether it's a specific intervention for a group of students that are struggling, or you notice that based on student data that, hey, these small group of students they need my support, they need my attention right now. And if I let go of X, Y, or Z, I can then give them that support they need in a more timely manner. So I think it's helping teachers see that, because I think a lot of them feel threatened by technology just in general. As we begin to roll out Canvas and other things we've done, people are like, "Oh, this is going to replace me." I'm like, no, not really. It's not, and that was never our we never mentioned that at all. So it's like they already had this preconceived notion that was the intention without us ever saying that. So I think it's out there. Okay, I think, and that might be part of the struggle why now we're back face to face, why they're so hesitant to embrace technology, even the face-to-face environment, because they like, oh, okay, well, we did online stuff, so now we're gonna pretty soon, sooner or later, I'm gonna be replaced by this, digital thing. Whereas there's still very much value in having a teacher, but now it's like understanding what parts and what aspects of teaching and learning the teacher can actually hone in on, if that makes sense.
A lot of soul searching about their real value, how precious they really are. Teachers are so precious. Yeah, it has to be said maybe every single day. Okay, so Dr. Buddy, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, definitely, working here in Ohio, heavily unionized, that's definitely been a big topic. Like you guys are getting this learning management system to replace us and that kind of thing. And so, as you just mentioned, that's definitely been a ongoing conversation and really just showing the teachers how they can use X tool, X program to help them, drive instruction. And, as was, I think PJ mentioned before, or someone else on the panel, when educators tell other educators, oh, well, this tool will help you save time, or this tool will help you, not have to do A, B, and C. Some of them may roll their eyes because they've heard that so many times before. So really just showing the benefits of the tool, the resource, how the technology can actually help them. And definitely, how can it save you time to be able to do something else? And I think that's helped us, like I said, just having these ongoing conversations, with our team so they really understand the role of each tool.
Yeah, that's leadership. Let's all talk about this as a group. That's awesome. Okay, PJ.
So I would say my experience isn't that teachers at this point are still fearing that technology is going to replace them. I think at least in our state, all you hear about is teacher shortages and how much they are in demand. I think for us, it's that I think there's two things that are commingled together. Number one is that when you go back up to bullet point number one that you had, which I think is written exceptionally well, that's culture. And so your culture will allow that or will not allow that. That's leadership and culture. And so if you put the best tech tool, the best digital aid, the best whatever in the worst culture, it's not going to take off. And if you put an average tool in the right culture, it might just go, right? And so to me, that's the foundational piece is building the mindset and the culture within. The secondary piece is that, and this might be Pollyanna, but most educators I have worked with really, really like tools that work well for kids. And so even the most tech avoidant teacher, when something takes off in our district, whether it be whatever tech tool it happens to be, and I'm not going to name any because I'm not sure if they're cool with your program or whatever. So whatever tech tool takes off, then everyone wants it. Because once enough kids and enough parents say, hey, this is really working well for my kid, why aren't they being exposed to it over here? Then we start to go. And so once tools work, that can help have a mindset shift as well. But for me, it's all about culture, and it comes down to, if number one, do we believe that student learning is above all else, and that's perhaps the best way to get to student learning is by the teacher stepping aside and facilitating as opposed to filling the bucket. And if we can get to that place, then we'll be on the search for tech tools to support us. But if we're not there, then tech's always going to be as that add-on, that one other thing. And so for me, it's all mindset first, and then we can find the right partner. If we don't have the right mindset, whatever partner it is, we're damning that partner as a result, because if we're not ready for it, we bring it in, there's no way it's going to work. But when we're ready, we can make almost anything work.
So very true. So very true. And I think that one of the things that's happening right now is that we had textbooks forever, right? And teachers, use those. That's what maybe not every chapter, but now suddenly pandemic, and even before that, they're going to make all their own instructional material. Wow. Right. What? Because you can't just copy and paste a book in. That's an intellectual property problem right there. So thank you for that, because I think that's a really good attitude of a leader. And I'm really glad you're making a good example for everyone today. I want to skip up to number 12 here of all of the points about the differences in model, which is models that disassemble the over-organizing around teachers only. This is a caveat. Rigid schedules and step-by-step linearity to make way for chunked and expositional experiential learning are a trend nationally, right? Like, let's go back to schools where I can learn woodshop, and we went the other way, academics, you know, for a good 45 years. And now the American public is seeking hands-on, expositional, discovery-based learning more and more and more. So wherever a model can provide that pathway more is the point of this. And I think, Zach, did I have you have something to show about how that works? I'm sorry, I think you're going to be talking about also digital manipulators, mastery system, text and sequencing.
Yeah, I think
really what goes on in professional grade.
And I think they're two separate things, really, for us. And I think with 11, with the over-organizing around teachers only, rigid schedules, step-by-step linearity, make way for chunks, experiential learning, that's really this that discovery-based project where we're kind of letting students kind of choose, and we're chunking that information in a way where yes, we're setting up the boundaries, but we're asking them questions in such a way that they have to go out and discover it and experience it. So, you know, we actually have, you know, times where we're having students go out and, you know, write letters to their representatives, where they have to kind of pick something that that means something to them, and use ethos, pathos, and logos to really, you know, hammer home their point and try to make change in their local municipalities. So it's that experience of saying, hey, I'm empowered. And, you know, while you can do that, obviously anywhere, I think with what we've seen in the digital space and the commercial grade space is that giving students the flexibility to kind of ruminate in certain areas or speed ahead in other areas is really powerful, and it allows them to really go out and experience even more. And I just want to make that, you know, make that clear. And then really that personalization is based on the student, it's based on the school, and it's also based on, let's face it, state standards too. I mean, especially I'm a social studies person, so there's different state standards for that discipline all across the board. And so I think the 12, which provides a step for digital manipulation, I think to that point, we also offer a product that's called, it's a custom course builder, where we can actually handpick the objectives, the learning objects, the order that students are going to work through. So really can personalize your, you know, what your school needs, what your students need on a personal level, or, you know, what standards you need to hit. And so I can share, I can show a screen share of the custom course builder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, including like mini games and that kind of stuff. And I think, go ahead and share, and then I'm going to mention this to all the educators. I'm coming back to you to talk about this shift during the pandemic of student agency that's now reflected in the pressure on schools for the model shift, because student agency got really big, and it's a demand now. Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, and so this is a way where you can build your own course out of our repository of lessons that we have, or projects that we have. Like you mentioned, you can gamify them, you can pick the learning objects and kind of move which order those learning objects come in to really personalize each one of your lessons. And then you can create lesson assessments. We can pull from different assessment pools from our repository of assessment questions, you know, multiple choice, true or false if you want short answer, where if you want those teacher intersections, if you want to design where those teacher intersections occur, you can do that through this.
Okay, Zach, perfect. I'm going to end off on that right now so we can get back to the speakers. So let's go back the other way around. PJ, student agency now is a big deal, and it's affecting pressure on everyone. What are your thoughts on that and model?
So I think that student voice has been the most underutilized resource in schools for a long time. So I think student voice and student agency is amazing and necessary, and will be the one thing that is a massive catalyst for change when that's systematized. We have a student sit at our board table and vocalize their opinion on everything. And I can have a 20-page well-researched report, and if a student gives it the nod, I think our board appreciates that more than the work I put into it. So I think student agency is vital in terms of moving that forward. I do think that there is a counter to that when that becomes a bit of entitlement or enablement that's also taking place in terms of the demands being placed on schools. And so I think that we need to be very clear as to what agency is and advocacy is and entitlement and enablement is, because I think those two things are running in counterproductive measures against for schools in one way and against schools in the other way.
I like that you said it that way. That was a perfect quote. Okay, great. All right, Dr. Buddy.
Definitely for us, we continue to look for ways to, infuse our students and definitely give them a voice. As small as, which I guess in their minds not small, really is how we even designed our lessons. Or this year, for instance, we've done the last 2 years a deeper focus with project-based learning. A lot of that came from the students just saying like, look, I'm bored in class. I'm tired of them lecturing me all the time. We want to do more STEM learning. So we, every quarter we do a couple different student town hall sessions where our student ambassadors lead the sessions. They lead the breakout rooms, and students, randomly get picked for these town hall sessions where they're able to give us direct feedback. And for us, that's really helped us, attract more students to the school because students know that their voices are being heard, and activities and programming that we've brought in over the last 6 years have come directly from kids telling us what they want to see and what they don't want to see in their school.
That's lovely, Dr. Buddy. I think that's very well said. Good. Glad you're doing it that way. All right, so Jesse, and then I'm coming to Wendy and we'll wrap up.
I think one of the ways that we've this year has honed in on student agency is like with the OTES, how teacher evaluation system changing. It's OTES 2.0 now. The rubric has been redone. It actually highlights in there that it makes a point of emphasis that the teacher can't be the sole person with the knowledge to help design lessons. So how are you getting other people's input into your lesson design? So it spells it out pretty clearly. Like you have to be getting other school professionals. You should be asking students. You should be asking parents and families. And the whole idea behind it is that as a teacher, I'm not the sole source of knowledge, right? I have to show some humility and be willing to ask other people for input in order to design the best lesson for my students. So it really makes it pretty clear that you should be doing that. And if you're not, going to be rated as highly as you should maybe thought you would be in previous years. So I think the way we've redone our state evaluation system is actually going to help with student agency because it's more prominent in the actual evaluation system, which is helpful. Because when we start incorporating, one of the things we're doing is how do we make sure we tie in our technology to the evaluation system? So how is using, for example, one of our tech tools is actually going to help you with your evaluation that you're going to get done to you anyway. And so if you're actually using it in a meaningful way, you're actually going to be, helping yourself when it comes to your own evaluation. So how are we making sure that whatever we introduce is aligned to what's currently being done? And that's just one example. But I think that student input and family input is huge because there's definitely things as a teacher you don't know about that you need to find out about in order to design a good lesson for students.
Yeah, well said. Okay, so Wendy, what are your thoughts? And then we'll wrap up the day. This has been so awesome as a conversation.
I would just say in particular, when you're looking at the commercial grade products, if you look for students having the opportunity to set goals, to self-assess, all of those opportunities to bring out that student agency is really going to have an impact on their success. I'm a huge fan, and I know Zach is too. It was one of the first conversations that we had of John Hattie's work. And you can really look at the effect scores that he found in his meta-analysis, and you can see what a difference it makes when you implement student agency in the work that you're doing with kids. So I'm excited that you brought it up, LeiLani. It's something that I could go on and on for hours, but I won't because I know we're out of time. So I'll just close by saying thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm really excited to be part of the dialogue.
Good. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been awesome. I did take some notes. You probably saw me writing throughout this so that when we go back and edit for the next reference guide from the EduJedi, it's going to have a lot of comments from what you said and some additional reference points that need to go in there that I wrote down. I'll pass it by some of the other committee members. But this has been awesome. Thank you from myself and Doug, our Chief Operating Officer. Our next event is the 10th, Digital Instructional Design. This is the Teacher Challenge, and there's money on the line. So if you have a teacher that wants to be part of the challenge of actually designing a lesson according to one of the 2 lanes of the model and submitting it, the EduJedi will grade it, and that's where the awards are going to come from, as who wins the money in the bucket, so to speak. So if you have a teacher, send them our way. But thank you all for being with us. Dr. Buddy, so good to see you again. I'm proud of your leadership. Thank you so much. Jesse, you too, you and your whole team. Sounds to me like you guys have done some heavy lift in the past year and you're still doing it. Thank you. And PJ, keep up the good work. You know, I'm sending you a hug, and know that you guys are going to do fantastic. You're going to get everything done. I know you will. And it's going to be awesome. So I'm proud of you. And Wendy and Zach, thank you for being with us today. Goodbye for now, everyone.